Welcome to the MindMill Podcast, where host Seth Marcus dissects and discusses all things impacting young adults. Peers, mentors, and professionals share intimate conversations on subjects such as entrepreneurship, exercise and health, music and art, the blessings and curses of technology, travel, and how to navigate adulthood in this age of information. We are the largest generation in history, and we dictate the future. The MindMill. Find your purpose, fuel your purpose.
Hey guys, before we start today's episode, I wanted to fill you in on my newest product, the MindMill booklet. Over the past years, my life has been transformed by my writing practice. I use a daily journal and digital note-taking apps to organize my life, pursue my goals, and hold myself accountable. However, my absolute most essential writing platform has always been my pocketbook. It's my mind's inbox, where I collect ideas, build lists, and capture notes from conversations. I love it because there are never any distractions, and it keeps me off my phone. For years, I used a simple blank notebook before realizing I could do this better. I wanted my daily pocketbook to have the sections we use every day: shopping lists, things to research later, favorite quotes, habit tracking, and etc. So I created it. The MindMill booklet is designed to be your catch-all for creativity and productivity. It's packed with useful and intuitive note templates, easy navigation, inspiring art, and powerful quotes. I keep mine in my back pocket every day. It's truly a game changer. The best part about it is that it keeps me productive and in my mind rather than on my phone. So pick yourself up a booklet, join the ever-growing community of writers, support the MindMill, and improve your focus by putting pen to paper. Go to themindmill.com for more details, one hell of a podcast, and all MindMill updates. Hello and welcome to the third episode of the habit hacking series here on the MindMill. Early in 2019, the MindMill teamed up with an event to promote the understanding, impact, dissection, and mastering of our personal habits. The summit, called Habit Hackers, was a massive success, bringing hundreds of participants together to learn from top performers, entrepreneurs, Super Bowl champions, and elite coaches. The day-long summit was packed with presentations and workshops to aid in mastering routines that shape our lives. I had the pleasure of interviewing the creator, David Blumenthal, on the podcast to discuss his inspiration for habit hackers. We also dove into our own trials and tribulations surrounding our own personal habits. A great episode, and be sure to go back and give it a listen or a refresher. David is expanding Habit Hackers this year with a series of mini workshops before the next big summit in early 2020. These workshops will give people hands-on opportunities to tackle their habits in different areas of life with accountability and social support. Whether you desire to transform your personal finance habits, create more effective communication, or build new structures for your health and fitness, you'll find something to take on with these workshops. You can find more information about all things Habit Hackers at www.habithackers.co. Today's episode is with Eben Pagan, business and lifestyle coach for online entrepreneurs. Like many coaches, Eben first found success in his own business. After writing his first ebook, Eben grew his company to a multi-million-dollar business with over 75 employees, completely online. He has since shifted focus to teaching others the tools he developed for success and offers an array of different programs. While Eben's courses are primarily focused on business, he teaches that mindset and lifestyle are directly connected to all success. Eben is a fascinating human, and I absolutely loved hearing about the systems and routines that he has curated for his optimal life. We kick off today's episode with a discussion about the Burning Man Festival, how it changed his life, how it inspires him every year, and why he believes it is a glimpse into the future of human civilization. We then dive into his daily routines and how he maximizes his day for productivity, connection, learning, and joy. Eben is constantly trialing new ways to improve upon his routines, including calculated break times, the best body state for reading, and the perfect superfood smoothie. All this and much, much more with Eben Pagan. Eben Pagan, welcome to the MindMill Podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's really great to have you on. You come very highly recommended by multiple people. I feel very blessed to have some time with you. So we were talking right before we started the show about the art and the background of this video conference that we're on right now. And I'd heard that you're very into not only the art scene, but also the fractal art specifically.
Yeah. So my wife and I, we met at Burning Man now almost 10 years ago. And if you go to Burning Man, one of the things that you see, along with all the things that you hear about, all the crazy stuff, you see some of the most amazing art I think that's ever been created. I actually think it's the best art that's ever been created by people. And you get to kind of see it in the context of the kind of visionary culture and the kind of psychedelic music scene and all of these things. And we were really, really taken by it. And so I met Android Jones there, several years ago and connected with him and made friends, and then have made friends with a lot of the visionary artists that we collect now, people like Michael Devine, Hans Voller, Emma Watkinson, Dennis Constantine, Min-Jae Lee, some of these artists. I just think they're making some of the best art that's ever been created.
Well, I'd have to agree. And it's obviously very psychedelic based, but it has so much deeper meaning to it as well. I haven't been to Burning Man yet. It seems to keep eluding me, but I think this year might be the first for me. I've been kind of putting out feelers and figuring out the lay of the land. Do you have any recommendations for first time burners? I mean, you're a decade in at this point.
Yeah, I recommend, if you can, go stay with a camp that has their act together, if possible, and that really gets into the spirit, so that you can plug in and you've got a community. And, if you forgot to get something, Burning Man's really amazing in that it's one of the places where you can basically walk around any time, day or night, and really feel safe, and like you can walk up to anyone, anywhere, and go for a cup of sugar, so to speak, or, hey, can I borrow some flour? But, if you need water or gas or whatever, there's always somebody that's willing to help. But it's nice to stay with a camp, because usually they have a theme. You can just plug in and get a download of what the culture is out there. It's an experiment in living in a new mindset. And yeah, it's kind of idealist and utopian. And yes, there are a lot of crazy hippies and drugs and whatever else, like a big festival that you want to find. But there are also some incredible things happening. There are a lot of mind expansion, a lot of amazing talks, a lot of cultural thought leaders, just a lot of folks there that are doing creative things and collaborating on interesting and creative things, and doing it in the spirit of giving and contribution. And, when you go and you see all these, these huge art pieces, and you realize that, most people, they just made them and they brought them there because they wanted to make that a part of Burning Man. And sometimes there are grants and things like this, but nobody's selling anything. There's no money being exchanged out there. And, well, you can go to Center Camp and buy a cup of coffee and ice, but there's, you can't buy or sell things out there. It's this, what they call the gift economy. You bring playa gifts for other people. It's a wonderful experience to be in. And again, some of the most creative people in the world are there.
That's all I hear about it, is that it is so utopian. But I also feel like it's kind of like when you experience that, you can apply it to your life the rest of the year. Sometimes you get this shock. I'm associating this with my travel experiences, where you're out there, you're in a totally different world and a lifestyle, and you're on the edge of your comfort zone, right? And when you come back, you kind of have this shock of going back into what you quote normal life, but you have these ideas and these visions that you have already experienced, and you can kind of apply them to different areas of your life. And seeing Burning Man and the community around it grow so much, I think it's doing hugely impactful things to society as is. I mean, now everyone at least knows of Burning Man, and many people have been. It's such an amazing global community that's building around it.
Yeah. Well, Burning Man's part of a family. These visionary festivals are all over the world. There are now hundreds of them. And there's a community of people that they show up and they do the music and the art and the installations and, all these different things. And visionary culture is picking up a lot of steam now. And I think that over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see it really intersecting with mainstream culture and really integrating and becoming more of another thread in the fabric of humanity.
Obviously, there's a lot of Silicon Valley and businesses kind of coming into the Burning Man space as well. Do you think it's a trend, or do you think it's more of a looking for a deeper meaning to the business ethics or the business drive behind these companies? I hear about this all the time, about businesses bringing their teams to Burning Man.
Well, I think that part of growth as a human being is having novel experiences, having the kinds of experiences that cause you to get a new perspective on yourself, on people, on what's possible, help you see a new vision for your life, help you look at things in ways that you couldn't have looked at before. And whether that's going and climbing a mountain or diving in the ocean or going to another country or going to a Cirque du Soleil show or whatever it is, there are some experiences, a great movie where you can go and have the experience and you come out and you're changed because it took you somewhere that showed you a possibility or showed you a new vision for how things could be or gave you new distinctions. And Burning Man is the most reliable source of that kind of thing that I've ever found, that I've ever seen, because you go out with a bunch, with tens of thousands, 70, 80,000 of the craziest, most creative and interesting people from all over the planet. And you drive out in the middle of the desert and you're dry and it's dusty and it costs a lot in terms of time, effort, energy, money to do. But then there's this oasis, the city that they build out there. And then you run into things like a giant 5-story tall pyramid that's built that you go climbing with your kid, and you talk to the people that built it and you learn about how they did it, or, massive 50-foot statues that are breathing and, all these incredible light shows. And as you can tell, I'm a big fan. I mean, I'm not I have nothing to do with the Burning Man organization or, whatever. And I have friends that are connected to these things, but I'm just a huge advocate for people going. My sales pitch is that you basically get to visit your future when you go to Burning Man. You go to Burning Man, you get to see something where you say, oh, that's the future. That's the way that things are going to be in the future. And then you get to come home and then go start living that way. And to just have that reference experience, to get that imprint of seeing and feeling a new way that you could be, a new way that humans could be, a new way that we could live, and really having the experience. It's not, imagining it or reading about it, but you see something and then you leave with it and you take that back to your life. It's priceless.
I agree. As I said earlier, I haven't been to Burning Man, but with my experiences with psychedelic medicines, it's very similar, of kind of the pseudo placebo effect, where you have this very real experience of unity and love and connection and kind of a higher minded state of consciousness. And even when you come back from that experience, you can still revisit it. And it's almost like a North Star, if you will, like I've been there, I've experienced this, and now you can't really go back, right? You're kind of like see where you're walking towards. So I'm very much with you with the whole your future self sort of thing. Do you worry about it getting just too big? It seems to grow every year. I hear so many people saying after their first year that I'm going every year now.
Yeah, I met my wife there almost 10 years ago. And so it's a very special place. We go every year. We take our little daughter. We went when my wife was pregnant. A lot of our best friends go there, and several of them have met there. So there's a little bit of a reunion happening. Everything is born, and then it lives and it grows up and it matures, and then it goes into old age and it dies, and it goes back into the, the energy is recycled into the system. And like anything, at some point, Burning Man is going to have lived out its years, but that is not happening right now.
Okay.
It's full swing. And I've talked to people who say, yeah, I stopped going in 1997 because it started getting too or whatever. I mean,
that's a cool thing that people like to say, right? About anything.
Yeah, every year things happen at Burning Man, and I just say that was a new level of creativity. And some people are insane. I mean, they've got, these art cars, these massive mobile discotheques with, some of them are literally millions of dollars. Where else in the world can you go out and go dancing in front of a machine that costs like $4 million to make, that's got spectacular lasers and light shows and the best DJs in the world, and then go walk for 5 minutes and there's another one and another one, and
right.
It's like hundreds of raves happening at night, if that's what you're into. I also happen to love the kind of the visionary music as well. I think this electronic music that's being made, some of it is super sophisticated. I'm not talking about like the dance music, but
right.
Really sophisticated musicians. I've met a lot of these folks, become friends with them. I support them. I love their music. A lot of it was born at Burning Man as well.
So cool. I'm thinking about it, it's so active. It's such an abundant festival. I think it might, please correct me if I'm wrong, it might teach you a new level or a new lesson in presence, because you just simply can't be everywhere at the same time. And there is so much going on at the exact same time that you really have no choice but to just let your journey take you and be where you're going to be at whatever time of day or night you're at.
Yeah, I mentioned Andrew Jones earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He's an icon of Burning Man.
Fantastic artist.
He once said to me that he said, Burning Man is the most important cultural event that happens on the planet right now. And I said, that's an interesting point, because you get so many different subcultures there, all doing talks and introductions and collaborating with each other and working on all of these art projects and things. On Saturday night, they burn the man. And that's this big party where everybody comes and all the art cars and loud music and dancing and fire and whatever. But then on Sunday night, there's a structure called the temple that's it's in the shape of a clock. And up at 12 o'clock is always this amazing wooden structure called the temple that is often just astonishing kind of sacred geometry. And over the week, everyone goes there and leaves pictures and notes and letters and memorabilia of people that they've lost that year, people who have died. You know, when you go there, it's just people crying and people playing music and people praying. And by the end of the week, every part of it is covered with all of this memorabilia and letters and notes and these heartfelt, gut-wrenching stories that you walk around and you read. And then on Sunday night, everyone comes and sits in a giant circle around it and they burn that. These experiences, they stay with you forever. Going through a mass grief ritual like that, very powerful.
That's fascinating. I know I could easily eat up all of our time just talking about Burning Man. Absolutely.
Me too.
I can tell. It's something that, and just hearing it from you makes me that much more passionate about going this year. So maybe I'll see you on the playa.
Yeah. And everybody come to Camp Mystic. We're usually these days up at about 2 and G. I do the art inside of our main space. I get permission from these artists to print some of their very best pieces. Several of my friends do the music. We have a great party on Wednesday night. Come check it out.
Absolutely. Well, Eben, I know you have your hands in so many different projects, but I wanted to specifically ask you about your business coaching platform. It seems like you've split it into, I believe, 4 different parts, at least from what I've researched. How did that all start for you?
It started with me being the most unlikely dating guru in the world.
Okay.
I grew up out in the woods of Oregon to hippie parents. And in my teenage years, I was a long-haired rock and roll guitar player, and I, made jewelry and things. And in my 20s, after making a high tippy top, I was making $75 a week as a guitar player. And I said, okay, I need to do something to become successful. So I went into real estate and didn't do very well there, but I discovered sales and marketing. And so I started learning about direct response marketing and, just how to get customers for businesses. And I started doing okay. I went to work for a seminar company for a while, and I moved to California. And I finally had a job. I got a little apartment in La Jolla, California, and I was, finally doing okay. But then I couldn't get a date. I was really kind of frustrated because I thought, okay, I finally got like a car. I got a cool car. I got a nice little apartment.
All the check boxes.
Exactly. But I still didn't know how to talk to girls. And so I went on a journey a few years where I started making friends with guys who were really successful at getting dates, and started reading books and going to seminars and just saying, I need to understand this. And if it's possible, I will. And I had some big breakthroughs there, and I got an amazing girlfriend. And then a good friend of mine, Dean Jackson, he showed me what he was doing selling ebooks online. And this was like 1999, 2000. And in 2001, I wrote a book of dating advice and I put it online, and it just took off. And I took everything I knew about marketing and I built a very successful business, multi-million-dollar company selling and teaching dating advice to men all over the world. For a while there, I became the #1 dating guru. And then I built a big, successful virtual team. We built our business all virtually. And this was something that no one was doing at the time. And eventually the business got up to like 70, 80 full-time people working all over the country and all over the world. And as I was doing it, people were asking me, how are you doing this? And I realized, I could teach this as business, And so I did a kind of a high-end entrepreneurship program called Altitude. And we had people come in from all over and kind of learn how to grow their businesses. And then I started teaching people how to publish information products and online courses. And then I started teaching things like creativity and productivity. And what essentially I found is that if there was some part of my life that I wanted to improve, where I wanted to get better, whether it was making money or being more productive or getting healthier or getting a date, having a relationship, that if I went and I dug into it for maybe a couple of years and really studied it and then kind of cracked the code on it, I realized, other people would want to know, kind of get the cheat sheet of what I learned. And so I started making courses that were anywhere from, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 hours up to some of them were 5 to 7 days. And I would package these up as audio and video programs and start selling them. And you said that, my business, eventually I broke it into a few different pieces and I've moved on. I'm doing other things now. I've been investing in technology companies for quite a while, kind of taking what I learned about business and collecting art. And now I have a little daughter and I still teach quite a bit, but it's one of the things in my life now. It's not the only thing.
Sure. A bit more automated at this point.
Yeah, automated, but I'm always changing. I always have to evolve. I have to do kind of the next new thing. While that probably costs me a lot in terms of money, the other benefits that I get from it really work for me. And so
the one that struck out specifically to me was the Wake Up Productive camp. And I was wondering, because I'm a big fan of morning routine, and I love asking guests on the show about their morning routine. Would you mind expanding a little bit on your own morning routine versus your Wake Up Productive program? Do you teach exactly what you do, or is there a slight difference that's a little bit more general?
Well, I first created Wake Up Productive about 10 years ago. I came back and made a new version of it a few years ago. My life has really changed since I had a daughter.
I can imagine, yeah.
When it was just me, when I was alone, my morning routine was I would wake up and I would drink, a half liter of water, and then I would exercise and I would meditate and I would just do kind of these things. When my daughter was born, I started getting up with her. I would be the one that would take her early in the morning. And so I would wake up with her and I would get her dressed or ready. And then I would put her in a little pack or a carrier and we'd go out for a walk for an hour. And then I would come home and hang out with her a little bit. And then I would do some of these other things that were my morning routine a little bit later. And it's interesting because just now, as we're talking, she's 5. I have just been considering, I think that it might be time for me to go back. I think I might be able to work it into my life where I have a morning routine that's kind of back to me because it's been so much kind of family. So I wouldn't say that my morning routine is something that you want to model right now because it's just a little bit more family. The one thing that I do that stayed consistent through it all is I make a big blender full of green shake that is packed with organic raw vegetables and then, every superfood that I could find and tweaked to, taste great. And I have one of those in the morning and then I give one to my wife and one to my daughter. And then I put another big one in the fridge and I keep that for the afternoon. I eat kind of 4 or 5 small meals through the day. That's my cornerstone. That's the big one.
Interesting.
That one, if I get that one right, so many other things happen in the day that really work for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
So obviously you're practicing routine and your child is picking up on how you live your life. Have you noticed now that she's 5 years old, have you noticed that she's starting to refine any sort of routine in her own world? Or is it kind of still just, wake up and spend time with daddy?
Routine is interesting, right? We're creatures of habit. Mm-hmm. If you look at all the things that you did today, you look at all the things that you did physically, the actions you took, you look at all the feelings that you felt, you look at the communications that you had, you look at the relationships and the ways you related to others, the thoughts, they're mostly the same as the ones that you had yesterday. For the most part, they're usually around the same time of day. So I don't think there's really any way of getting out of routine or habit. It's just sometimes you can be a little more intentional about it, And right. I think that if you want to be a really productive, successful, creative, fulfilled person, that you need to go through a phase in your life where you learn the structure of how to create and groove habits into your life. And you learn how to do it in the different dimensions. You learn how to create physical habits where you have kind of muscle memory. You learn how to create emotional habits so that when emotional situations come up, that you respond in the way that is more empowering. And you learn how to create mental habits where you think certain thoughts and where you kind of automate having certain reactions to things, but also kind of certain proactions where you start using mental models more consistently in your thinking, in your analysis. And so when you start making routines and rituals that maybe are 30 minutes or 60 minutes or 2 hours where you're working on a particular thing. But later after that, there's a stage post rituals and routines and habits, which is where you go back to regular life, where you're not just creating yourself as a robot anymore. You're a more dynamic present person and you transcend and you can use and remix them almost like vocabulary. So I'm a little more experimenting with that phase because I have put a lot of different types of routines and habits into my life. I mean, we could talk about some of these. We could talk about some of these layers. And yes, I do see her doing certain things that are interesting and she has her own routines.
Yeah. The birth of this mindfulness movement, the age of information, and now applying that to the new generation is a fascinating subject to me. Even though I don't have a child, I think we've seen the kind of the sway into a distracted nation with screen addiction and the lack of understanding on how our habits and routines shape our lives every day. So I love talking to parents about applying mindfulness techniques and instilling good habits and just an ability to reflect on the habits that we do have and have an objectivity to it. maybe it's not going to fix itself overnight, but we can at least be aware of it, which is the beginning of taking steps towards fixing it.
Yeah.
Well, we're on the topic of habits. I wanted to ask you a few questions more specific to your daily habits. How does the role of habits play in your life? Is there a specific time of the day that you observe your habits, or are you just kind of going for it from the very beginning?
I'm working on a course right now that's actually called Super Habits.
All right.
The concept of it is because I created this course called Wake Up Productive, which is all about creating habits in your life, in your personal and your business life. And after working with this for a while, I realized that there were certain structures that become templates or contexts in life. So for example, I learned from Jim Loehr and Tony Schwartz about this idea of the ultradian rhythm. I think it's Ernest Rossi wrote a book about this. And our circadian rhythm is the 24-hour rhythm where we're asleep for 8 hours and awake for 16. But through the day, we also have one that lasts about 90 to 120 minutes where we get energy and we're up, and then we kind of come down and we're down for maybe 20 minutes. And then we kind of go back up. And so, for example, when I teach people about designing habits, and particularly around work, I recommend that they work in a 2.5 hour structure that I call a 60-60-30, where they do basically an hour, take a little 5-minute break, an hour, and then take a 30-minute break. This structure kind of optimizes for that because you can get a couple of hours of focused energy, and then you unplug for 30 minutes, maybe have a little meal, go for a walk, just meditate, lay down and relax, take a 20-minute nap, that kind of thing. And so structures like that, for example, if I'm booking a day of meetings and calls, I will book myself for 90 to 120 minutes, and then I'll have a break for 30 to 60 minutes. Because I've been doing that superstructure of the focused blocks and then the breaks, that's something that it now just is part of what I do. It's a part of the way that things are wired. Mm-hmm. And I've also now, because I've done it for long enough, I'm able to notice when my energy is up and when it's coming down. And the benefit of that is that if you notice when your energy is up, you notice you have high quality attention and willpower available, you can go and put it on something that's important. You can know what the high leverage things are, and then you kind of more automatically do that. You go to the things that are most important. And then if your energy is coming down, instead of eating sugar or drinking caffeine or whatever it is, you can go and take a break, and you can take a nap, or you can go for a walk and do some exercise. These kinds of things, they're these meta structures that are really built in. I was reading, what's his name's new book, When? Daniel Pink, is that it? I think it's him. Wrote a book called When, and I picked up a new thing in there, which I'd kind of heard about in the past, but he really lays it out. This idea that really high-performing people, they all have this unconscious but natural structure that they do, which is they wake up, they get into their work, they stay in their work pretty focused until usually around maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then they usually take a couple of hours off, and they just go and relax, and then they come back, and they get another couple of hours in, and that afternoon break from about 3 to 5, I've really been working with that one for the last several months, trying to incorporate that. And it really works for me. Again, that's a kind of superstructure that you put in that's more meta to any particular habit.
Totally. It can fit any different type of day as well.
Yeah.
We don't just have these set hours every single day. Well, at least many of us don't. We obviously have to be a bit reactive throughout the day as well. So it is interesting to see these larger time groupings. And it's fascinating that you would say that too, because we're interviewing right now at this time, which is kind of in that period in mountain time. And I specifically kind of shifted my break time a little earlier today in order to be refreshed and ready to go for these meetings right now. And it's exciting to me to hear that, my own rhythm is not just particular to my own. That's kind of like a human feeling that more or less we all share.
Yeah. And I shifted this myself. I scheduled it at 5 my time, which is okay. Eastern. And I took a little 20-minute nap, about an hour before we did this. I've been doing other things, and I was teaching earlier today as well.
Cool. Yeah. I chose to take my break with I've been toying with the Wim Hof breathing method. I have a meditation practice in the morning, but I've continued to hear from athletes as well as some other guests on the show, just about how powerful the physical and mental shift is from the Wim Hof breathing technique. And I went upstairs, and it took me about 12 or 14 minutes. And it's just unbelievable, the shift in your physicality and in just your mental status. You just come back feeling like you're ready for almost anything afterwards.
Yeah, I love breathing exercises, and I've seen Wim talk, and I picked up a few tips from him as well. Yeah, he's great.
He is a definition of a badass. When he starts talking about how long he can stay in the cold, it's, I still struggle with it just a few minutes. He's quite a human. I would love to take one of his conferences or meet him one day. Well, I'll move on to another question. Is there an early discipline that cultivated success for you? One that really seemed to trickle down or snowball into more successes?
Learning and knowledge. Most people just don't realize how high a leverage the right piece of knowledge can be. We live in a world where I remember hearing Steve Jobs talk about software and software developers. A great software developer is not 20% better, like 50%, but it can be like 10x better, or 100x better, to have somebody who can do all that math in their head and then kind of come out and do the experience. We're not used to living in a world like that. Where we come from evolutionarily, maybe the best thing that you could get might be like 10% better than the next best thing or something.
Sure.
And knowledge is just so massive. I mean, the right piece of knowledge can be 100x or 1,000 or 1,000,000x more. And so for me, learning has always been that thing. Reading books, finding people that are subject matter experts, people that have been studying some area. I've always been interested in learning, and not just learning like the book sense, but learning by going out and having different experiences, actually going out and putting myself into the experience to have an experiential learning, or to learn by doing. Because when you learn by doing, you learn at all levels. You learn physically, you learn emotionally, and you learn mentally. When you learn just by reading a book or watching a course, you have to then take the knowledge and then generalize it over into your life. Mm-hmm. That's not real learning. So learning new things, different things, learning how to play the guitar, learning how to make jewelry. I said I tried these different things when they're, earlier in my life. They weren't the things that I wound up doing in the long term, but I learned important skills that I've brought with me over my life. Yeah. So learning and learning diverse things and learning by doing.
I love it. That's so resonant with what's currently going on right now, because this culture right now where we absorb so much information through just instant news feeds and posts and pictures and things like that. And we're like a sponge, and we're oversaturated, and we don't have any time to really digest what we've picked up on and bring it into kind of our core fabric, our fascia, if you will, which is the experiential learning. So I'm really glad to hear that that's what your answer was, because it's something that I share with you. Music for me has given me the skill set to stick with something and to continue to try something and to look at things from a different point of view. It also has helped me work well with others too, because there's nothing more dramatic than being in a young band where everybody's got different views of being a rock star. Everybody wants to be a front man, how that is. Yeah. What about in the last 6 months? Has there been a specific habit in the last 6 months that's been a game changer for you?
I can give you several, but a lot of the habits that I work on right now are what I would call optimization habits.
Okay.
In a lot of cases, they have to do with seeing things in a new way, or having a different reaction to something. Or I'll give you one that's just a little bit outside the box here, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. I'll come up with a couple here. I've noticed over the last few years that when I read or when I consume video, there's no real comfortable way to do that as a human being, right? So you could be standing up, and I'm standing right now as we're doing this interview. I have a standing desk in my little office bedroom as well. And I try to stand as much as I can. I learned that early. I go through phases with it. I do it, more and less, but life works better if I'm standing. But if you're standing and reading, there's something that's a little weird about that, because you have to balance, and it's just not that natural. Okay. So then the other choice for most humans is sitting down. And sitting, as they say, is the new smoking. There's no real good way to sit, because it's not natural for us. So I've tried experimenting with like laying down. Okay, well, I'll lay down, but then you've got to kind of put a pillow under your neck if you're reading, and so a couple months ago or something, I said, all right, there has to be a better way to do this. And so I reasoned in my head that there would only really conceptually be two ways to solve this problem of learning, of reading or consuming content without either standing up or sitting. And that would be either laying down flat on your back or laying down on your stomach. Those are two positions where there wouldn't be any stress on your body. So I said, okay, how could this be? And I went on a quest and to really figure this out. I did a ton of experiments. My wife's got pictures of some of them, maybe for a book someday.
Okay.
And I dug an old massage table that we had out in the closet, and I laid face down in it, and I tried reading, looking straight down, and I had to get a special face cradle for it because the one for your eyes wasn't big enough, and I had to experiment.
Okay.
That was actually pretty cool. Interesting experience laying down. Then I went online and I found these Prism Glasses where you put on these glasses and they've got these little prisms, and they allow you to see, you can lay flat on your back, but then they allow you to see what would normally be in your view if you were sitting up. And
kind of like a rear view mirror when you turn it so it deflects the bright lights behind you, sort of like it shifts the prism a bit.
Well, kind of. It turns your vision to 45 degrees. Apparently old people buy these things so they can lay flat on their pillow in bed and they can still watch their television down at the foot of the bed.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, they were $5, so I bought them and I put them on and I bought the cheap ones. And they have these tiny prisms and it was goofy, but I could see once I put them on and I laid flat on my back, I could see, gosh, if this might work. Anyway, I went online, I found a nice pair. They were like $30 and I had to figure out how to get my glasses to work with them. And again, tons of experiments. But I finally started using them after figuring all of the pieces out. And what a game changer. What a game changer to lay flat on my back. I prop my legs and my knees up so that it's kind of zero gravity style.
Yeah.
And the ideal learning state is to be completely relaxed. Okay, I don't know if you've ever read any of the old super learning books and so forth, but to actually put your body in a position where you're every single muscle of your body is completely relaxed and you're able to read, it's a total game changer. And so I've been trying to practice when I'm reading, taking that extra 5 minutes to go set that whole situation up. And I'll tell you what, I'm reading more. I'm getting a lot more out of it. I'm able to stay focused on it. And I just noticed that there was a ton of friction that was coming from the way I was doing things before. That's one example of the kind of thing that I'm always on the lookout for and that I'm always stacking. I'm always trying to put these conditions in place so that if you just kind of look at me on a normal day, there's several things I'm doing like that seem a little bit unusual. But when you understand the reasoning for them, they make a lot of sense. I'm right now building a video studio in my office bedroom of our home because I realized I want to teach a lot more. And now the equipment is such that I can run, I think, a 3-camera shoot all by myself and make really high quality productions. But it's taking me a couple of months to get that thing all finished and get all the pieces and figure out all the lighting and the mics and all the switching. But once it happens, fingers crossed, it's going to become a ritual, a routine, a habit to just be teaching a lot more. I've got about 20 different courses I've been collecting over the last few years that I want to start teaching. And so it's things like this. They're kind of like rituals, but they're also kind of not. With my daughter, for example, I've been learning over the last few years how to respond to her if she gets upset or triggered or frustrated with something. And this is an emotional thing. And it's not the same as spending the first 2 hours of every day working on your product and your marketing, but infinitely more rewarding in a certain way, because once you crack how you emotionally respond to something and you can do it in the moment, there's a type of esteem that's built that's very powerful. Anyway, those are a couple of examples.
I love it. It seems like you could just go on for it. I love talking about habits. I know we can't go too deep into it, but I worry about when I take out all friction into my physical being that I would be too likely to fall asleep, especially with reading. I mean, a lot of times I read before bedtime and I'll find myself again dozing off. It seems like laying on your back with your feet up and perfectly still is great until reading time turns into nap time. Well,
that means that you need more sleep. That's your body telling you that you haven't slept enough. And it's definitely happened for me. I've definitely fallen asleep when I've been reading this way, but I just take it as a signal that my body needs to rest. What more important thing is there to do than to give your body the rest it needs?
Right. Most of us are so starved for it, giving us the rest that we need and giving ourselves a break. If we're not the most ambitious person in the room, we kind of self-perceive as lazy, if you will, which is just a total fallacy. Let's flip it around a little bit. Are there any ineffective habits that have stuck with you throughout the years that have been proven more difficult for you to break?
Yeah. I mean, my wife and I, we argue a lot. We tend to fight about a lot of things. We've made a lot of progress in the last few years with the help of some great therapists and friends and coaches and things. That's one. And lately we've had some breakthroughs lately that have been very good as well. And it was much worse when we kind of first got together, but that's one that's challenging. It takes a lot of energy. The positive side of it, one of the reasons why I don't put every bit of energy I can into eliminating it is that I find that when we argue or when we fight about something, and when it's consistent and persistent and deep, if we just stay at it, and then when we're not triggered and we're feeling better, we come back and we debrief and we really try to understand each other and we just keep going, that eventually we have some of the biggest insights that we've ever had about ourselves, what it means to be a human being, other people, things that we can teach to other people in our courses and so forth. And so these fundamental truths, these principles, they can only really be discovered experientially. So yeah, that's one that's come along that's been pretty challenging and painful, but also that's had a lot of payoffs.
Sure. Well, I think we have time for about one more question and a little wrap up. But, we talk a lot about routine and habits and obviously the discipline equals freedom philosophy that surrounds that. But how do you handle routine versus spontaneity in your life?
In the Myers-Briggs Jungian kind of system, you've got these two modes of life, right? One is judgment and one is perception. Some people, about half of people, like to plan everything out and then follow their plan. My mentor Wyatt calls them structurists. And some people, these are judgers, right? Some people, the perceivers, right, of the world, they like to keep their options open. They like to wait till the last minute for everything, only make a decision if they have to, deviate from the plan. I mean, any plan is only the best knowledge you had up until that moment, and it's always up for revision. And perceivers are great improvisers. So these two modalities, right, these are two kind of fundamental archetypal structures. Whichever one you are, you will tend to think that that's the right way of being in life. But I think it's worthwhile to get to know the other way. And, in life, as you get older and you start to really become an adult and you take on more responsibility and you have more relationships, you can develop your shadow function, in this case. And so I think it's very important to balance structure and improvisation, or having a plan and freedom. And for me, I do an exercise regularly that I call the Ideal Life Designer. And it's kind of a multi-level exercise where I ask myself questions like, what would be in the ideal day? And then what would be in the ideal week? And then what would be in the ideal month? And then what would be in the ideal quarter? And then what would be in the ideal year? And then what would be in the ideal decade? And there are different things that show up in each of these orders. Okay. So, within the ideal day, for example, might be a session of playing with my daughter. Okay. In an ideal week might be a day to spend with my daughter, or it might be 2 days off in a row in an ideal week. In an ideal month, there might be a longer period of time, right? Maybe 5 days where I would take off. Or in an ideal month, there might be a trip somewhere that I would go and physically go and travel somewhere or go to an event. In an ideal quarter, or maybe in an ideal year, I go to Burning Man. Mm-hmm. Well, each of these things at the different orders, you can't do in the other orders because you need the different amounts of time. And so if you sit down and you say, what is in an ideal day? What are all the things that have to happen so that I end the day and say, that was an ideal day? What are all the things that have to happen in a week? What are all the things that have to happen in a month, in a quarter, in a year? You can make a list of 3, 4, 5 things that happen at each scale. And then I get calendars, or sometimes I do it on my computer, or I just draw it in my journal. I'm always coming back and trying to design and fit them all together like a puzzle. And I just did a new one. I just got a new kind of dry erase calendar that I bought on Amazon, and some dry erase markers, and I put it up on my whiteboard, and I just did an ideal month, and I incorporated a bunch of different structures into it. And by doing this, it allows me to create a structure that within that structure, then I have a lot of freedom and I can improvise. But by setting some of the conditions and setting them in such a way, like, for example, when I agreed to do this interview with you, I set a condition where in this, let's say, hour we're going to talk, I believe that there's going to be a very high probability for high productivity, because we're going to be here, we're going to be talking, I've got my gear, I got my light on, I told everyone to be quiet, we're on the air, this is showtime here, this is game time. If you can set conditions so that there's that kind of spirit when you come walking into each thing, whether it be going on a date with your partner, or whether it be going and hanging out with a friend, or going on a trip, or going on a vacation, or getting a massage, when you set up all of the conditions so that that experience, whatever it is super high quality, again, whether it's productivity or whether it's rejuvenation, I think it really just changes the whole game, when you kind of design your life in that way. Now, I'm more of a perceiver. I'm more of an improviser. I don't really like structure that much, so I have to kind of make myself do this. That level of structure to like a real judger, they would say, what are you talking about? That's nothing. I plan my life down to the minute. And I would say for that person, you probably want to allow yourself to be spontaneous a lot more, because from spontaneity and improvisation comes surprise, comes innovation. From that creative spark where you just stop what you're doing and go try something, or call someone, or take a risk, to reach out. That's where, if you just look back at your life, the most important things that changed the course of your life were serendipitous, and they were accidental. And so when you open yourself to serendipity and you go off for the spontaneous trip with your friends, or you follow your whim to read a book, that's in a lot of cases where you're going to find your gold. That's where you're going to discover your gems. And so you want to balance these things. You want to figure out how to get them to live in harmony with each other.
Right. Eben, thank you so much. That was such a wealth of knowledge. I feel like we crammed so much into just a short window of time. I'm really looking forward to meeting you down the line. All things I will add into the show notes to get in touch with Eben Pagan. And there's so much to digest right now. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate your time so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hey everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the MindMill Podcast. If you loved this episode, check out some of the other MindMill episodes. They're all free and available at themindmill.com, as well as all major podcasting platforms. Also, please take a moment to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's incredibly easy and really is the best way to support the show. Stay tuned for more MindMill episodes coming down the line. I'll keep them interesting for you, I promise. Take it easy.